Good evening to all of you and welcome to another episode of iMed. And on today's episode, we are focusing on mental health and mental well-being, something that is not considered very serious, especially in conservative countries coming from conservative backgrounds. But on today's episode, we have an expert in the house with us. With us, we have Dr. M. Ganeshan, consultant psychiatrist from the National Institute of Mental Health. A very good evening to you, Doctor, and welcome to iMed.
Thank you.
Doctor, let's before we deep dive into what mental conditions and what mental disorders there are, let's talk about the importance of mental well-being as opposed to just being physically fit and physically well. Let's talk about the importance of mental well-being for all individuals out there.
Yeah, I think that's very important because when we talk about mental health, very often people think only of mental disorders. Yes, they are important, but mental well-being is as important or more important because that's important for everybody. Right? So mental well-being is a state of well-being where we feel okay with ourselves, we are confident, we are able to move around with people well, we are able to solve our problems, manage our emotions, and have good relationships. To form good relationships and also to break relationships in a positive way without fighting, and also be productive in such a way where our capacities come out. For example, some people can be very good speakers, but because they are shy, their capacity, their talent doesn't come out, which becomes a major handicap for their further progress and achieving their full kind of a potential. So mental well-being is all about these things. So if you look at it quite seriously, all of us could make our mental well-being better than what it is.
Doctor, we often use mental disease or mental illness and mental disorder interchangeably. Is there a difference when it comes to mental illness and mental disorder?
No, it's the same thing. Because you see, when we talk about a disease, very often we know exactly what causes it. We know the changes that are occurring in the body because of the disease, and especially if it's affecting particular organs, then we can look under the microscope or do scans and actually find out the exact mistake or changes that are happening there. But when it comes to mental health problems or mental disorders, unfortunately, brain is an extremely complex organ. So still scientists and researchers are working out exactly what is going wrong where. We know the chemical basis of some of them, but we don't know exactly what is wrong and exactly what is wrong. So therefore, we prefer to use the word disorder rather than a disease where we know exactly what is happening.
And Doctor, since you mentioned, I'll make sure I'll use the word mental disorder, the right terminology moving forward. If you look at the mental disorders, what are the most common disorders prevalent in Sri Lanka?
So the common disorders that are common in Sri Lanka as well as the rest of the world, the number one would be depression. Right? So depression affects about, it varies research, but about 6 to 10% of the population at any one time, which is quite important. So when it comes to lost working days, impact on economy, depression plays a very big role. And it's a common cause for people staying off work.
Doctor, when you say depression, now we know there's clinical depression, which is actually a disorder, but especially with millennials, with these younger generations, even if their favorite cricket team loses a match in a league, they said they're depressed. We see this term being used by so many people for so many different things. Is there an impact over the use of this word?
Yes, so that confusion is there. You are very right about it. We use the word depression for anything that affects us. So depression, when we use in common parlance, is something happening that upset me, like you said, maybe even a cricket match, and I'm unhappy about it, I'm saddened by it, and that is a very transient temporary process. So on the other hand, like you said, when we say depressive disorder, very often there is no direct kind of an external factor that causes it. There can be external factors that cause it, but that's over a long term and more serious ones. And also the symptoms will last more than 2 weeks. Very often it will go on for months. And the lowering of the mood will be to a very significant degree. There are, it's not like feeling upset, to use a better word for what we use, the millennials use as depression. It's much more serious than that. Their motivation is gone. As I said, lost working days. It's the commonest one in the world.
Doctor, let's talk a bit more about the symptoms of depression, because I believe it is of utmost importance that the people around the affected identify these symptoms. Can it even lead to things like hallucination?
It could when it is very severe, but that's very rare. So the depression symptoms are very important because they come very insidiously and very slowly, and very often we miss it ourselves until it becomes like quite serious. So a lack of interest in things that gave us interest. Maybe now I'm not that interested in the teledramas that I was like looking forward to, or maybe I'm less interested in the cricket matches now than what I was earlier. Or even playing with my kids, or things like that, our hobbies, our interests, that goes down a bit. And also a sense of persisting sadness, unable to have happy thoughts. And also going through the day seems more difficult than before. So things that I was able to do very easily earlier now looks like a big burden. Oh my God, how am I going to go through this day? How am I going to achieve these things? How am I going to finish all this? And these are the simple tasks which I did very comfortably earlier. So these are some of the common ones. But also, one of the common symptoms is people become more irritable. They are snappy. They lose their anger very easily. And so family members will very often pick it up much earlier. And they also don't want to like interact with friends that much. It looks too much of a burden. No, it's too much. So I'm not going to go out with my friends. When people come visiting, oh my God, are they coming again? So where earlier, like we were looking forward to those sort of social interactions, they are more withdrawn. And also they can have sleep issues. So some people tend to oversleep when they are depressed, but more people lose sleep. So they wake up very early and they don't know what to do, and they have negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. They also can have suicidal thoughts, thoughts of death. And many of the people with depression will lose weight because they have lost interest in the food as well. But some people would gain weight because of comfort eating and all that. So these are some of the symptoms. But anger is a very important symptom, especially in the South Asian context. We become more irritable, angry, snappy, and that's a very common symptom. And also another symptom that is very common in our part of the world is what we call the somatic symptoms. Recurrent headaches, backaches, pain behind the eyes, burning sensation of the body. Mm-hmm. So these are some of the common symptoms in Southeast Asia, this region.
Doctor, when it comes to physical illnesses, if we talk about non-communicable diseases like diabetes, cholesterol, we talk about how important early detection is. So when it comes to mental health, is it the same? Is it as important as identifying physical illnesses? How important is early detection?
Early detection is very important because one, the suffering, right? So people who undergo depression, the negative thoughts come, they think they are useless, they are burdened to the family, others are suffering because of me, I'm a useless person, nobody loves me. And they feel very isolated and lonely. And that's a terrible feeling. And that's why they start thinking of, what's the point in continuing life? I feel I'm dead. And they even attempt suicides and stuff like that. So So it's a very horrible feeling. And because of the anger, because the others don't understand exactly what this person is going through, right? So this can, end in damaged relationships, separations, divorces, families fighting with each other, and losing our social circle. And also the productivity part, right? Their work productivity goes down, so sometimes they may lose their jobs, they may be taking many off days, and that again can cause problems in workplace. Their relationship with children can have consequences because they are now snappy, they are irritable. The relationship between them and the children gets damaged, and that also is very difficult to repair sometimes if it persists for a long time. So the consequences can be quite serious. And also some people try self-medication. Very often people go on to start taking alcohol because it causes some benumbing of the emotions and also may help initially with the sleep. So they start self-medicating themselves with alcohol, and some friends also may advise, say if you are feeling down, take a drink and you will feel better. It only makes depression worse, but that also can have health and other consequences. Yes.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for enlightening our viewers on the symptoms and quite importantly on the repercussions of mental illnesses as well, the consequences that we all might have to go through if we don't take action. Now that we've covered the symptoms, also, what should be the first course of action when you see someone who is affected by these problems? When you witness the symptoms in a family member, what should be the first course of action?
So very important thing is to be supportive, right? So sometimes, some of the symptoms I said, isolating themselves, anger, etc. We might tend to distance ourselves from somebody who is suffering from depression if we don't understand what the person is going through. So it's very important that we are there supporting the person and gradually get them to understand, hey, this might be some illness related issue, shall we go and seek help? So it has to be done pretty carefully because very often because of stigma and various reasons, people don't want to accept that they are suffering from a mental health problem. But telling it in a sensitive manner and saying, I'll come with you and I'll come to the doctor with you, let us go and see what's happening. This is not your normal self, you used to be a very kind, self-confident person. There seems to be a change, let's go. One of the mistakes sometimes people make is to ask them to step out of it. Mm-hmm. Hey, how much problems I have, yours is nothing. See how I'm coping with it. It's not a good thing to say. That's going to make them feel more awful, right? So others are able to deal with their problems, I am unable to. So it's very important not to say things like that. Step out of it and, come on, do something and get over it. Why are you sitting like this? Those things are not helpful. So to be supportive, accompany them and get them to go for some help.
I think, like you mentioned, that is a very big problem, especially in a country like Sri Lanka, where you compare your problems. If my problems are bigger than yours, your problems are insignificant. I think that's the kind of mentality we have. And there's a lot of stigma around mental health and mental illness as well. And doctor, so you mentioned that you should seek out help as it's needed and the right way to approach someone who's affected by mental illnesses. What are the available options in Sri Lanka right now for you to get help?
So in Sri Lanka, we can be very proud that we have a very good system of mental health services. So every district in Sri Lanka has a mental health unit and there is a consultant psychiatrist there. And also there are diploma holders, there are medical officers of mental health. So within 5 to 10 kilometers of where you live, there is mental health services available, which is free of charge, right? So it's very important that we take our person, our family member, or if we are suffering from depression ourselves, to go to our closest hospital and ask when is the mental health clinic and I want to go and I want to talk to the doctor. And there is no big waiting list. Like, so even in some of the developed countries, there is a very long waiting list, up to 6 weeks, 6 months sometimes, to see a doctor who is specialized in mental health. Whereas in Sri Lanka, it's not the case. So within weeks, within days, you can see a doctor, and you can talk to the doctor and explain the symptoms. And very often it will be diagnosed, and you will be sent in the right path to get the right help.
Doctor, post-pandemic, everything has become virtual. So when it comes to mental health issues as well, are there virtual options available for people to get help?
There are. There is a hotline, 1926, which runs 24 hours from the institute I am working in, National Institute of Mental Health. And it's in bilingual, Sinhala and Tamil. So anybody can call it at any time, and they'll be answered. And so if they call and ask, I'm coming from this area, I'm having these problems, and there is a qualified nurse, with the support of doctors, they will answer your queries. So they will tell you where to go, and how to get help. All that information will be provided. So that is there.
Right, doctor. I think we've covered the symptoms. We spoke about the repercussions, the consequences of mental health illnesses, and why it's so important for us to seek help when it is needed, and the right way to approach it as well. Now, if I may ask, I know that when we started off the conversation, you mentioned that the brain is a very complicated thing, and mental illnesses can be quite complicated to understand as well. But if I may ask, are there any causes for mental illnesses, the commonly identified causes for things like depression?
There are some associations, but it's very difficult to say they are causes, right? So childhood trauma, difficult childhood, being bullied in school by other students or teachers can cause depression, especially growing up in an environment of domestic violence, where parents are fighting and there's domestic violence, and children grow up witnessing it, can cause depression. Also, children who undergo abuse, the chance of getting depression is very much higher. And also in adulthood, again, domestic violence is well known to cause depression. Alcohol use is another important causative factor for depression. And also economic deprivation, severe poverty can cause depression. So there are multitude of associations that are closely linked to depression, but to say exactly this caused it is tricky.
Right, thank you for that, doctor. And given that there's so much of stigma surrounding mental illness and depression, let's say that you are from a conservative family and you need to go out there and seek help, and you understand that there is a need, but sometimes we understand because of that conservative family, you might not be able to go out and seek help. Your parents might say, okay, it's just in your mind, like you mentioned earlier, just snap out of it. We all have our problems. As a youth, or as a child, what are the steps that you can take if that is your situation?
Yeah, what you say is a very important issue. So we have had children who are suffering from depression, and children are much cleverer and much more progressive than us, we who are older. So they tell their parents, Dad, Mom, I think I'm having depression, because now they have checked it out on the internet and Googled it and all that, and the parents say, no, don't, and this is something, nothing, you'll get over it, and they postpone getting help, and that affects the children's education, their social life, and they really suffer. And so sometimes they bring the child to us after 1 year or 6 months, when the disease has progressed, the disorder has progressed quite significantly. So it's a problem for the youth, and especially the person who is suffering from it. So most of the schools have school counselors, so that is one way that the children can seek help. Go and talk to a counselor and say, hey, I'm having symptoms of depression, teacher, do you mind helping me, where can I get help? So maybe the counseling teacher, if she can talk to the parents, he or she may be able to convince the parents of the importance of seeking help. So the parents might need some counseling, some education, about this, and that could be one way. Or the child can connect with an aunt or an elder brother or a cousin who will be a bit more persuasive towards the parents and educate the parents. So getting that help is very important.
And I think another factor that contributes to the stigma is, let's say that you do go and get some help, there's a lot of shaming in the community, in the family. Okay, that kid is crazy, or that kid is mad, is gone nuts. These are the terms that are derogatory terms that are actually in use quite unfortunately. So I think the use of these words in society has had a lot of impact on this stigma perpetuating as well. So I believe it is because of these things that the stigma continues to perpetuate. So are there any actions being taken, especially by the Institute, to sort of raise awareness and sort of break down the stigma?
Yeah, so whenever we get opportunity, we try to give the message on to the public, and that is a challenge. So in other countries, most of the stigma has gone off, partly because famous personalities have come forward and said, hey, I have suffered from depression, and I took treatment and I am fine, and that is a very important thing for breaking down stigma. In Sri Lanka, that has happened to some extent, but it's not enough, because as you said, the society is still very conservative, and somebody who comes forward and says, I have had depression and I'm recovered, there could be a bit of a shame involved and other things. And so we need more famous people to come forward and to talk about openly, and more we talk about it, gradually the stigma will go down. The good thing is the younger generation is not as stigmatized as the elder generation, which is a great thing.
Yes. Now, on an ending note, Doctor, what you can give a message to our viewers on the importance of mental health, and especially taking care of your mental health and not just the physical health, the importance of overall well-being.
Yes. So we were talking about depression. So one important message is depression is a very, very treatable condition. And if you seek help, within a few weeks, all the symptoms will go away and they will be fully recovered. So it's very important we get treatment for this treatable condition. Yes, as you said, mental well-being is extremely important. So there are many ways of looking after our mental health, good sleep hygiene, how we eat, how we exercise, things like relaxation, meditation are very helpful. So simple things that we can do to safeguard our mental health, and it's something that we need to focus on.
Thank you very much, Doctor. So with us today, we were in conversation with Dr. M. Ganeshan, consultant psychiatrist from the National Institute of Mental Health. Thank you very much, Doctor, for enlightening our viewers on the importance of mental health and how to combat depression and how treatable it is. And we were in discussion about the stigma that surrounds mental health and mental illnesses, and the importance of breaking down this stigma, breaking down these barriers. And it's up to all of us, as Doctor said, it's not just one party's responsibility, it's all our responsibility to break down this stigma, break down the barriers, and make us all understand the importance of complete well-being, including the most important part of it, mental well-being. So thank you very much, Doctor, for being a part for today's show.
Thank you.